Trickster finds the fastest ship in the galaxy, abandoned 327 years ago, but it only cares who you are. While most people stayed close to the settlements, building a life they thought they could control, Ilior thrived in the forgotten places, where the light from distant stars barely touched, and the air smelled faintly of rust and old machinery. He called himself a scavenger, but in truth he was more like a seeker of stories, of secrets, and most importantly of opportunity. He had a reputation, of course. Across the scattered colonies, tales were told of his cleverness. Sometimes those tales were admiring, praising his quick thinking in tight situations. Other times they were warnings, tales of mischief or trickery that left people scratching their heads. Ilior didn't mind. He liked the way the stories kept him larger than life, a shadow that moved where he pleased. But the truth was quieter, lonelier. The stories never mentioned the nights he spent staring at empty space, wondering if he would ever find something that truly mattered. That day began like any other. Ilior floated between the skeletal frames of old ships, his boots making soft clicks against the metal decks. The sun was just a pale smear against the blackness outside the colony, and the wind, more like a ghostly sigh here, stirred the fine dust around the abandoned shipyard. It was a place people mostly ignored. No one came here unless they were desperate or daring. Ilior, he liked to think, was a little of both. He ran a hand along the surface of a corroded hull. The metal was cold, but it hummed faintly under his touch, as if it remembered the life it had once carried. Ships were more than machines, Ilior believed. They had histories, personalities, secrets. Some were proud and stubborn. Others were silent, brooding. And then every so often, a ship appeared that defied explanation, that made you wonder if it was built for a purpose you couldn't yet understand. That day, he felt a pull, a tug he couldn't ignore. The readings on his handheld scanner blinked faster as he moved closer to the far end of the yard. At first, he thought it was just another old craft, covered in layers of dust and corrosion. But something was different. The energy signature was faint but unmistakable, smooth, controlled, unlike the jagged bursts from abandoned shuttles or derelict freighters. Ilior paused, holding his breath. The scanner beeped again, softly, insistently. The readings weren't just unusual, they were alive. Curiosity pushed him forward. He ducked under a dangling panel and stepped into a narrow corridor between two hulks. And then he saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow, a ship half hidden behind scaffolding and piles of scrap. But when he stepped closer, the outline became clear. This ship wasn't just old, it was ancient. And it was perfect. The surface was sleek and smooth, untouched by the corrosion that claimed everything else around it. Its edges glinted faintly in the dim light like it had been polished yesterday, not centuries ago. Ilior's pulse quickened. He had heard rumors of ships like this. Legends whispered in dark corners of the colonies about a vessel called the Phantom Arrow, a ship abandoned over 300 years ago, faster than anything known to human or alien craft. Stories said it had been lost after a mysterious journey, and no one who tried to claim it had ever returned the same. Some said the ship was cursed. Some said it simply chose its pilots. Ilior didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in opportunity. And here it was, shimmering in the half-light like it had been waiting for him. He circled the ship carefully, his fingers brushing against the hull. It felt warm, almost as if it recognized him. Strange, he thought, machines didn't feel anything. But then some machines were more than machines. He could see the control panel through the translucent canopy. Faded symbols glowed faintly, like writing that had been carved into stone centuries ago. Ilior knew better than to rush in. Ships like this didn't reward the impatient. He crouched down, examining the entrance hatch. It was sealed, but not in a normal way. There were no locks, no wires, no rusted gears, just a smooth surface, almost alive, that seemed to ask a question without words. Ilior took a deep breath. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "Well, let's see what you want." He touched the hatch, and it responded. A faint click, then a soft hiss, and the panel slid open, revealing the interior. Inside, the ship was darker than the outside light suggested. It smelled faintly of ozone and old metal, but there was something else too, something clean, almost like the air before a storm. Ilior stepped inside cautiously. The floor was polished, reflecting his own figure back at him. The controls were alien but inviting, almost as if they knew how he would move. He ran his hand along the main console. Lights flickered and settled into a pattern, glowing in shades he didn't recognize. He could feel the ship watching him, measuring him. The thought made his chest tighten. It was alive, not in the way people were alive, but it wasn't dead either. There was intelligence here, a subtle, almost imperceptible awareness. Ilior smiled to himself. Finally, something worth testing his wits on. The ship hummed, faintly at first, then stronger. A display lit up with words in a language he didn't recognize. Symbols and patterns shifted and flowed like water. Then slowly they began to form shapes he could understand. Questions. Not just ordinary questions, but ones that seemed to probe him deeper. "Who are you?" it asked. "Why are you here?" Ilior laughed softly, shaking his head. He had heard of smart ships, but this was different. It wasn't asking about skill or wealth or past achievements. It was asking about him, about who he really was. He paused, thinking, who was he? The question wasn't easy. To everyone else, he was the clever scavenger, the trickster who could get out of any trouble. But that was a mask. Behind it, he was a man who had made choices he wasn't proud of, who had hurt people to survive, who had lied and cheated when the easier path wasn't available. Could a machine, or whatever this ship was, see that? Could it judge him fairly? He didn't know. But he knew he wanted to try. "I'm me," he said finally, more to himself than the ship. "I'm Ilior Trask. I take what I can, I solve what I must, and I learn when I have to." He paused, unsure if that was enough. The ship seemed to pulse in response. The lights shifted, glowing brighter in patterns that made his stomach twist with excitement and fear. Then, almost imperceptibly, a hatch opened deeper inside the ship, inviting him further. Ilior stepped forward. Each step felt heavier and lighter at the same time, like he was moving through air and water simultaneously. The corridors twisted in ways that didn't make sense, angles bending and curving as if the ship itself was alive, adjusting to him. He felt both thrilled and nervous. Every instinct told him this was not a simple scavenger find. This was something different, something that could change the course of his life if he survived it. He reached what looked like the cockpit. The seat slid forward as he approached, and controls rose to meet him as if they had been waiting for his hands all along. Lights shimmered across the panels, forming symbols that danced and changed faster than he could follow. Then in the center of the console, a single message appeared in clear text. "Only those who know themselves may ride." Ilior laughed softly, a mixture of disbelief and excitement. He knew the challenge was greater than anything he had faced. This was no ordinary ship. This was a test, a mirror, and he, the trickster of stories and rumors, would have to face himself to see where it could take him. He leaned back in the seat, feeling the subtle hum of power beneath him. The Phantom Arrow, he could call it that, he thought, for the legends were true, was not just fast, not just advanced. It was selective. It chose who could command it, who could trust it, and perhaps who could survive it. Ilior didn't know if he was ready, but he knew one thing. He had never felt more alive in his life. As the colony's pale sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, Ilior Trask sat in the cockpit of a ship abandoned 3 centuries ago, listening to the quiet hum of something that might change the galaxy, or at least change him. And in that moment, he realized that the adventure had only just begun. Ilior's fingers hovered over the controls, but he did not press a single button. The ship was alive in a way he could feel, subtle and insistent, as if it were breathing under his hands. The lights on the dashboard shimmered softly, and the symbols continued to shift, forming patterns that teased his mind. He realized the Phantom Arrow wasn't just a ship, it was a challenge, a test, and somehow it already knew him. He leaned back, taking a deep breath. Memories flashed through his mind. The small cons he had pulled in the colonies, the times he had lied to survive, the friends he had tricked to get ahead. Each memory felt heavier now, more real. He had always laughed at the stories people told about him, claiming he was clever and untouchable. But the ship didn't seem to care about cleverness. It wanted truth. A panel slid open beside him, revealing a glowing screen with a single word, "Confess." Ilior frowned. Confess. He had cheated, stolen, lied, but what did it want him to confess? He stared at the screen, wondering if this was a trick. The Phantom Arrow had an intelligence far beyond anything he had ever encountered. He had always considered himself quick, able to talk his way out of danger or twist situations in his favor. But now he felt unsure. Could he outsmart a machine that could see him so clearly? He decided to speak aloud, even though he wasn't sure why. "I've done things I'm not proud of. I've lied to survive. I've hurt people, sometimes without even thinking. I've taken what wasn't mine, tricked those who trusted me. And I've often wondered if I deserved to get away with it." The ship was silent for a long moment, but the lights pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Then the display changed, showing a series of faces, people he had met, helped, or tricked. He recognized some immediately: traders who had trusted him, friends he had abandoned in tight situations, even a small orphan he had once lied to protect himself. Each image faded slowly, replaced by a question. "Do you regret them?" Ilior swallowed hard. He had never thought about regret this way before. He was a survivor. Survival didn't leave room for regret, but seeing those faces now, seeing the tiny but lasting effects of his choices, something stirred inside him. "Yes," he admitted softly, "I regret them. Not all the time, sometimes I forget, but yes, I regret them." The ship hummed again and the screen shifted. The words were simple but heavy. "Why are you here?" Ilior hesitated. The question was not about how he found the ship or what he hoped to gain. It was deeper. Why had he wandered all these years, seeking ruins and relics, always looking for something more? He realized he had never asked himself that before. I'm searching," he said finally. "I don't know what exactly, something that matters, something real. I've seen a lot, taken a lot, survived a lot, but I've never known, not really." He felt the weight of honesty in his chest. Saying it out loud made him feel exposed, but strangely lighter. The ship seemed to respond, the hum growing warmer, more inviting. Then a soft vibration ran through the floor. A new panel opened, showing a holographic maze, twisting and turning, impossible angles folding in on themselves. The display pulsed with energy, forming paths that seemed alive. The ship wanted him to move, to act, to demonstrate more than words. Ilior realized that the phantom arrow wasn't satisfied with confessions alone. It wanted to see his true self in motion. He stepped into the maze, feeling the floor adjust to his weight. The paths shifted with him, opening new doors and closing others. Each turn was a test, a decision about trust, honesty, patience, and cleverness. Some paths tempted him with shortcuts, obvious ways to cheat or manipulate the maze. Others forced him to confront difficult memories, showing him illusions of the people he had tricked, testing whether he would face them or avoid them. Ilior felt sweat on his brow, but he smiled. This was unlike anything he had faced before. He was a trickster by nature, but he had never seen a puzzle that could look inside his heart and know the truth. And the maze was not just about intellect. It demanded integrity, reflection, and courage. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time seemed strange inside the phantom arrow, passed as Ilior navigated the shifting corridors. Sometimes the walls would whisper, memories replaying like holographic fragments of his past. One scene showed him stealing food from a trader who had trusted him. Another showed a moment when he had abandoned a friend in danger. Each vision forced him to pause, to think, to accept what he had done and why. At one point, he stopped before a small figure in the maze, a young boy staring up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Ilior recognized himself in the boy, innocent, curious, untested. He remembered lying to this boy years ago and how easy it had been to twist the truth. Now the boy's eyes seemed to ask for honesty. Ilior knelt down. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't understand then, I do now." The boy nodded, slowly fading away, leaving a faint glow that lit the path ahead. Each test seemed designed to strip away the layers he had built around himself. The trickster, the liar, the survivor, all were challenged, forced to confront the part of him that was real and unmasked. And with each step, the ship responded. Panels lit up, paths opened, and the hum grew stronger like it was approving, encouraging him to continue. Suddenly, the maze ended in a wide chamber. The walls shimmered with soft light, and in the center, a pedestal rose, glowing faintly. The console above displayed one final question. "Are you ready to truly know yourself?" Ilior's heart pounded. He realized this was the ultimate test, not about speed, skill, or cunning. It was about courage, courage to face everything he had been, everything he had done, and everything he wanted to become. He closed his eyes, thinking of every choice, every trick, every lie, and every kindness he had shown. He thought of the people he had hurt and the people he had helped. He thought of the adventures, the near-deaths, the narrow escapes, the laughter, and the loneliness. "Yes," he said finally, his voice steady. "I am ready." The pedestal glowed brighter and a door slowly opened behind it. Light spilled across the chamber, warm and inviting, as if the ship itself was smiling at him. Ilior stepped forward, feeling a surge of exhilaration and fear. The maze was gone, the illusions faded. He was no longer being tested, but he knew that the tests had changed him. He was still a trickster, still clever, but now he was more than that. He had faced himself, and the ship had acknowledged him. He returned to the cockpit, the hum of the phantom arrow vibrating through his bones. The controls were alive now, responsive, almost eager. Symbols danced across the panels, forming paths, charts, and starscapes that Elior could barely comprehend. The ship did not need instructions. It understood his intentions, his honesty, and his character, and it would only follow someone who was willing to be true to themselves. Elior laughed softly, a mixture of relief and excitement. He had never felt so connected to anything before. The phantom arrow was not just a machine, not just a ship. It was a living challenge, a mirror that reflected who he was and perhaps who he could become. And now, for the first time, he felt like he belonged somewhere, not just among ruins and scattered colonies, but here, at the beginning of a journey that might stretch across galaxies. Hours passed as he explored the ship, testing the controls, feeling the hum of energy beneath his feet. Every panel, every button, every lever seemed alive, responding not just to touch, but to thought. The phantom arrow could see the truth in him, and it trusted him enough to reveal its secrets. Elior realized that nothing in the colonies had prepared him for this. Not his cleverness, not his survival skills, not his charm. Only honesty, courage, and self-awareness could unlock the full potential of this legendary vessel. By the time he finally sat back in the captain's chair, the stars outside had shifted, and the colony below seemed tiny, almost unreal. Elior leaned back, hands resting on the controls, and smiled. The phantom arrow was ready, and so was he. The adventure was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. And in that quiet, humming cockpit, Elior Trask felt a sense of purpose he had never known. The Trickster had found more than a ship. He had found a challenge, a companion, and a reflection of himself. And for the first time, he realized that the galaxy was not something to be conquered. It was something to be understood, explored, and respected. The phantom arrow waited. Elior was ready. Elior Trask had spent hours in the cockpit, learning the phantom arrow's rhythms, feeling its energy hum beneath his fingers, and marveling at the living intelligence of the ship. Every control, every display, every panel seemed to anticipate his thoughts before he even acted. It was exhilarating, but it was also terrifying. He knew that the legends had been true. This was no ordinary ship. This ship chose its pilot carefully, testing not just skill but character. He took a deep breath, letting the tension in his shoulders ease. The colony below shimmered faintly in the dim light of distant stars, its buildings tiny and fragile compared to the vast emptiness of space. Elior knew he couldn't stay here forever. The phantom arrow was calling him outward, toward the galaxy beyond, toward journeys no one had attempted in centuries. And most importantly, the ship would only allow him to go if he truly understood himself. He adjusted the main controls, feeling a subtle surge of energy run through the floor and into the chair. The symbols on the panels shifted, forming patterns that suggested routes, stars, and paths he had never imagined. Elior traced them with his fingers, absorbing information faster than he thought possible. It was as if the ship was teaching him, showing him the cosmos not as a map, but as a living, moving organism full of rhythm and motion. The first step was simple: test the engines. Elior pressed a small lever, and the phantom arrow responded immediately. Lights flared along the hull, and the ship hummed louder, vibrating under him like a coiled spring. The stars outside streaked faintly, not because of speed, but because of the energy the ship radiated. Elior felt a thrill in his chest. It was real. He was finally moving, finally flying aboard the fastest ship in the galaxy, but the ship was not content to let him celebrate. A new display lit up, a stream of data cascading down like waterfalls of light. Then words appeared. "Do you trust yourself?" Elior froze. The question was simple, yet impossible. Could he trust himself after all the lies, all the tricks, all the choices that had defined him for so long? He had always relied on quick thinking, on charm, on luck, but now the phantom arrow was asking for something deeper. I think I can," he said cautiously, though his voice was barely a whisper. The ship seemed to hum in approval, and the energy around him intensified. He felt a subtle pull, a guiding hand that encouraged him to let go of hesitation and take the first real jump. The seat vibrated as the ship shifted slightly, testing the limits of its systems. Elior gripped the controls, ready for whatever would come next. Then it happened. The stars around him blurred, stretching into long lines of light. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, speed beyond comprehension, yet a sense of calm and control. The phantom arrow moved with elegance, twisting through space as if it had no boundaries. Elior could feel the ship thinking, responding, and almost breathing with him. He laughed aloud, exhilaration bubbling from his chest. This was freedom in its purest form. Hours, or maybe seconds, time was strange here, passed as he navigated the empty stretches of space. The ship responded to subtle thoughts, anticipating his maneuvers with uncanny precision. Elior realized that this was not a vessel to be piloted in a normal sense. It was more like a partner, a living entity that required understanding, honesty, and trust. Every decision he made, every movement he took, reflected not just skill but character. The ship knew him in ways no human ever could. Suddenly, the lights on the console shifted again, forming a series of holographic images. Elior leaned forward, intrigued. Each image was a log, a record of previous captains who had attempted to claim the Phantom Arrow. He watched in awe and apprehension. Some had tried to cheat, using their cunning to force the ship into submission. Others had lied, claiming virtues they did not possess. None had succeeded. The logs ended in failure, sometimes in destruction, sometimes in disappearance. And then Elior saw the last entry, a faint, almost faded record of a pilot who had never returned. A shiver ran down his spine. The ship was selective, yes, but it was also merciless. It would allow no deceit, no pretense. And yet here he was, moving smoothly through space, the ship responding to him. The realization hit him. The Phantom Arrow was not just fast, it was discerning. It mirrored the truth of anyone who tried to command it. The ship would reveal who you were, and perhaps who you could never escape from being. Elior's thoughts turned inward. He remembered the maze, the confessions, the illusions of the boy, and the faces of those he had wronged. The ship had judged him in a way, and he had passed. But now, in motion, he saw a new dimension of that judgment. The Phantom Arrow tested honesty not just in words, but in action. Every decision, every turn, every acceleration was a reflection of self. He understood that the speed, the power, the freedom, all of it came with responsibility. A sudden alert flashed on the main display. A nearby asteroid field appeared in his path. Elior's first instinct was to take a shortcut, to weave through with risky maneuvers to test the limits of the ship. But then he hesitated. The Phantom Arrow pulsed under his hands, almost as if reminding him that this was not about bravado. He adjusted his approach carefully, respecting the natural flow of the obstacles rather than forcing his will upon them. The ship responded, shifting its course subtly, guiding him safely through the jagged rocks. Elior realized with a thrill that the Phantom Arrow trusted him, and he trusted it in return. As he emerged from the asteroid field, a new display appeared. The words were simple, almost poetic. "You are ready to see the truth." Elior's heart raced. He had not expected the journey to feel so personal, so reflective. What truth was the ship about to reveal? He watched as a holographic map formed around him, stars and planets, nebulae and voids, all connected by faint lines of energy. It was not just a navigation map. It was a history of journeys, of souls who had traveled before, of choices made and consequences faced. And then the final revelation came. A voice, soft, almost imperceptible, spoke inside his mind. Not words exactly, but thoughts that seemed to merge with his own. The ship does not care for skill, for speed, or for fame. It cares for truth. It chooses not the strongest, but the honest, not the cleverest, but the self-aware. And now it has chosen you. Elior exhaled slowly, the enormity of the moment sinking in. He was not just a pilot. He was a participant in something greater, something beyond the ordinary understanding of space and time. The Phantom Arrow had revealed its true nature. It was a mirror, a judge, and a guide. It would not bend to ego or ambition. It would only follow those willing to confront themselves. The stars outside seemed to shimmer with new intensity. Elior leaned back in his chair, letting the sensation wash over him. For the first time, he understood that the ship was not merely a tool or a prize. It was a teacher, a companion, and a reflection. Every turn, every jump through space, every decision he made was now connected to a deeper understanding of who he was. As he continued to fly, he reflected on what the Phantom Arrow had shown him. The ship had forced him to confront his past, his mistakes, and his true intentions. It had tested his courage, honesty, and integrity, And in passing, he had discovered not just a vessel of unparalleled speed, but a path to understanding himself. The journey was far from over. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, filled with mysteries, dangers, and wonders. And yet, for the first time, Ilior felt prepared. He knew the phantom arrow would respond to him, trust him, and reveal new truths as he ventured further. He was no longer simply a trickster seeking treasure or fame. He was a pilot, a seeker, a man who had faced himself and found both flaws and potential worth pursuing. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time was fluid in the ship's presence. Ilior explored every function, every panel, every subtle vibration that revealed the phantom arrow's mood, intelligence, and intentions. Each moment was a lesson, each action a reflection. And though he had mastered the basic flight, he knew the true adventure was not speed or distance. It was discovery, both of the galaxy and of himself. At last he paused, looking out at a cluster of distant stars. They shimmered like jewels against the darkness, beckoning him forward. The phantom arrow hummed softly beneath him, almost as if it were smiling. Ilior realized that the ship's greatest gift was not the ability to traverse light years in moments. It was the ability to teach, to test, and to reflect. And now, having faced its challenge and earned its trust, he was ready for the next stage of his journey, understanding the cosmos, facing its dangers, and uncovering its secrets. He exhaled, a mixture of excitement and calm settling over him. The phantom arrow waited, patient and powerful. And Ilior Trask, the trickster who had become more than a trickster, prepared to leap into the unknown, knowing that the ship would respond only to his honesty, his courage, and his willingness to face the truth. For the first time, he felt the weight and the wonder of what it truly meant to fly, not just across space, but into the depths of understanding, both of the universe and of himself. And with that thought, he pressed forward, letting the stars guide him, letting the ship respond to him, and letting the adventure unfold in ways he could never have imagined. Ilior Trask had flown farther than he had ever imagined possible. The phantom arrow moved with him as if it were a part of his own mind, weaving through stars, nebulae, and vast stretches of empty space. Every movement felt effortless, yet every moment carried weight. The ship had shown him that speed alone was meaningless without purpose. It had taught him that honesty, courage, and self-awareness were the true measures of mastery. And now, as the stars stretched endlessly around him, Ilior understood the gift he had been given. He leaned back in the cockpit, hands resting lightly on the controls. He thought of the colonies he had left behind, the dusty settlements clinging to planets at the edge of the Andromeda sector. People who had once feared or admired him now seemed small, almost distant. And yet, he felt a connection to them stronger than before. The phantom arrow had taught him more than flight. It had taught him the value of integrity and the meaning of responsibility. As he guided the ship through the void, he remembered the maze, the confessions, and the illusions the ship had shown him. He had faced his past, his mistakes, and even the parts of himself he had tried to hide. He had confronted the boy he once was, the friends he had wronged, and the lies he had told to survive. And now, as the phantom arrow hummed gently beneath him, he realized that every choice he had made, good or bad, had brought him to this moment. The galaxy stretched ahead like an endless tapestry. Planets spun silently, their rings glinting in distant starlight. Nebulae swirled with colors he had never imagined, painting the black canvas of space with radiant streaks. The phantom arrow glided past them, effortlessly avoiding hazards that would have destroyed any other ship. It was not just fast, it was alive in a way that challenged him, that demanded respect. And Ilior respected it. He knew that this was not a tool for conquest or fame. It was a companion, a guide, and a mirror of his own character. He thought of the logs he had seen of previous captains, those who had failed to master the ship. Some had tried to force it to obey them. Others had hidden their true selves behind lies or pride. None had succeeded. And yet here he was, moving smoothly through the cosmos, learning and growing with every jump. He realized that the phantom arrow was not just a ship, it was a teacher. It had tested him, judged him, and now trusted him. And that trust was more valuable than any treasure he could imagine. As he traveled, Ilior began to notice subtle patterns in the galaxy. There were regions where colonies struggled to survive, planets where resources were scarce, and systems plagued by danger. He realized that with the phantom arrow, he had the power to make a difference. not by conquering or controlling, but by helping, guiding, and rescuing. The ship would respond to him because he had proven his honesty and courage, and with that trust came responsibility. His first act of purpose came sooner than he expected. A distress signal blinked on his display, faint but urgent. A small colony, isolated and poorly supplied, was facing a shortage of food and medical supplies. Ilior could have ignored it. He had flown this far and could continue to explore the unknown. But the phantom arrow pulsed gently, as if encouraging him to act. And for the first time, Ilior understood what it meant to be more than a trickster. He adjusted the controls, directing the ship toward the colony. The journey was quick, faster than anything he had imagined. And yet he felt a sense of connection, a sense of purpose as he arrived. He guided supply pods down to the planet's surface, watching as the colonists reacted with surprise, gratitude, and relief. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Ilior realized that his cleverness and skill could be used for more than survival or personal gain. The phantom arrow pulsed again, almost approvingly. Ilior smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. This was not about glory or legend. It was about understanding, about using his abilities in ways that mattered. He realized that the ship had not only tested him, but had shown him what kind of man he could become. The galaxy was vast, and there were countless opportunities to help, to explore, and to grow. And the ship would only respond to those who acted with truth, courage, and self-awareness. As he left the colony, Ilior reflected on how much he had changed. The trickster he once was, always scheming and lying, was still a part of him. But it no longer defined him. He had learned to balance cleverness with honesty, humor with responsibility, and freedom with purpose. The phantom arrow had shown him that true mastery was not about power, speed, or fame. It was about understanding oneself and using that understanding wisely. Days turned into weeks as he traveled through the galaxy, visiting distant systems, discovering uncharted planets, and observing civilizations struggling to thrive. He used the ship's speed to deliver supplies, assist colonies, and outwit dangers that would have trapped lesser pilots. Each mission, each jump through space, deepened his connection with the phantom arrow. He no longer thought of it as a tool or a prize. It was a companion, a teacher, and a reflection of himself. Ilior began to notice something remarkable. As he acted with honesty and courage, the ship seemed to respond with new abilities. It could anticipate obstacles, adjust routes with precision, and even communicate subtle guidance through symbols and vibrations. He realized that the phantom arrow's true power was not just its speed, but its connection to its pilot. The ship amplified not just skill, but character, and Ilior's character had grown stronger with every test and challenge. He remembered the early days, the long hours in the maze, the confessions, and the illusions. All of it had led to this moment. He had faced himself, confronted his mistakes, and learned to act with purpose. And now, with the phantom arrow as his companion, he felt a sense of freedom and responsibility unlike anything he had ever known. The galaxy was no longer a place to exploit or escape. It was a place to understand, explore, and contribute. One day, as he flew past a glowing nebula, a thought struck him. The phantom arrow had chosen him not because of skill or speed or cleverness, but because he had proven willing to confront himself honestly. It was a reminder that life, like space, was vast and filled with challenges. Only by being true to oneself could one navigate it successfully. And in that moment, Ilior felt a deep sense of gratitude. He knew that the journey was far from over. The galaxy was still full of mysteries, dangers, and wonders, but he was ready. He had learned the lessons of the phantom arrow, and he had begun to understand the true meaning of mastery. Speed and skill were fleeting, but honesty, courage, and self-awareness were enduring. And with the ship as his guide, he could face whatever the cosmos had in store. As he approached another cluster of stars, he reflected on the story he would carry with him. Not the story of tricks, schemes, or fleeting victories, but the story of growth, understanding, and purpose. The phantom arrow had transformed him, not by teaching him to fly faster, but by teaching him to live with integrity, courage, and wisdom. And he knew that the legacy he created would not be in legends of speed or daring escapes, but in the lives he touched, the colonies he helped, and the truth he carried within himself. Ilior's journey continued. He visited distant planets where civilizations struggled, always moving with intention and care. He avoided unnecessary risks, guided by the ship's subtle cues and his own growing wisdom. And with each mission, he felt the Phantom Arrow respond to him more fully, its intelligence and awareness deepening. It was not merely a vessel. It was a living reflection of his choices, a companion that required honesty, courage, and care. One night, as he floated above a quiet planet, he reflected on the lessons of the past. The maze, the confessions, the illusions, they were not tests of skill, but of character. The Phantom Arrow had shown him that growth came not from escaping danger, but from confronting oneself honestly. And as he gazed at the stars stretching endlessly before him, he realized that this was only the beginning. The galaxy awaited. Countless lives, countless challenges, countless wonders remained. And Elior Trask, once a wandering trickster, was ready to face danger, to explore and to grow, ready to act with courage, integrity, and purpose. Ready to leave a legacy not of speed or cunning, but of understanding, compassion, and honesty. The Phantom Arrow pulsed beneath him, a steady heartbeat of power, guidance, and trust. And Elior smiled, knowing that he was no longer alone, no longer just a trickster seeking adventure. He was a pilot, a seeker, a man who had faced himself and earned the trust of the fastest, most discerning ship in the galaxy. With a deep breath, he pressed forward into the unknown, letting the stars guide him, letting the ship respond to his choices, and letting the adventure unfold in ways he could never have imagined. The galaxy was vast, full of mystery and wonder, but Elior Trask was ready. And together with the Phantom Arrow, he would discover not just the secrets of space, but the truths of himself. The trickster had become a legend, not for speed or fame, but for courage, honesty, and wisdom. And in the quiet hum of the Phantom Arrow, as it glided effortlessly through the infinite stretches of stars, Elior knew that the true adventure was not just in the journey outward, but in the journey inward.